Hello! Today we are going to make a cheddar loaf. This is really easy. It takes about, I'd say about 5 minutes to put together. It takes about 45 minutes to bake. You actually have to have the patience after it's done baking to let it cool. And the longer you let it cool, the better it is. The flavors really come together. And as it cools, you're able to get a good, strong cheddar flavor. But you know, I've cut into it a little bit sooner because I also like warm bread. But trust me, if you follow this, you will not be disappointed. So what you're going to need is 1 cup of Parmesan cheese. I have mine already grated. You're going to need an 8.5 loaf pan. I have greased this with a little bit of olive oil. You can spray it with nonstick spray if you like, but I don't like having plastic in my food, so I used a little bit of olive oil. You could use a little bit of butter if you would prefer. I've also got the oven on at 350 ready to bake. We've also got 12 ounces of flour. I happen to be using gluten-free flour today. We're going to use 1 tablespoon of baking powder. We're going to use a quarter of a teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and an 1/8 of a teaspoon each of cayenne pepper, which is optional, but because we're using so little and it is a cheddar bread, this is a really nice accompaniment. And for someone who doesn't like a lot of heat in her food, trust me, this works. Same thing with the pepper, an 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper. We've got 4 ounces of grated sharp cheddar. It's freshly grated sharp cheddar. I'm going to use 3 ounces of unsalted butter. So there's my cheddar that we just talked about. We're going to use 1 1/4 cups of sour cream. That's going to give us a nice tang. It's also going to add a little bit of the moisture that we need in there. And 2 large eggs, which we're going to incorporate as well. So let's get started. All right, so first things first, we're going to take about 1/2 cup of our Parmesan and just layer it on the bottom of our pan. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to set this off to the side. Now we're going to take all of our dry ingredients. We've got our flour. We're going to put in 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. And make sure that's level when you do that. So there's our 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. We're going to put in 1 tablespoon of baking powder. So we've got our baking powder. Remember, you've got this lip here at the top. So when you reach in, you can make it nice and level. All right, so we've got that. And we're going to just go ahead and combine this using our whisk. Make sure everything gets in there. I'm going to add in my 1/8 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And for me personally, this is one of those times where I don't do heaping. So 1/8 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And now I'm going to kind of eyeball the pepper itself because I know what that looks like. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my freshly ground pepper and get about 1/8 of a teaspoon. It's almost 10 turns of my pepper mill. All right, so we've got our flour mixture all put together. So we're going to move that off to the side. And we're going to get our wet ingredients together. Oh, sorry, I forgot my salt. We're still going to need some salt, so I need a 1/2 teaspoon of salt to go in here. So we're going to go ahead and add that in. And let's combine that. This goes so fast, sometimes I forget to add something. But that's the reason why you want to have all your ingredients laid out in front of you, so it's very clear what you still need to put in there. Okay, so we're going to save our cheeses for just a moment. I'm going to take my eggs and crack them into the bowl. got one egg. We've got our second egg. Okay. All of our eggs are in the bowl. And because we want the eggs to incorporate nicely, we're going to whisk them just to break them up. We're going to put all of our wet ingredients in here. Okay, so the butter has been melted, but it's not hot. Okay, so I'm just going to pour that in. All the butter goodness out of there. And we use unsalted butter because the cheeses have salt in them. And if we added more, and you saw we have added some cheese, it would just be way too much. So let's get the sour cream. And I'm going to use my spatula just to make sure I get it all out of my measuring cup. And my second measuring cup, which most of it will fall out, but don't want to leave anything behind. I'm going to leave this off to the side here. And again, I'm going to whisk this all together so it's combined. Got a nice homogeneous mixture here. Okay, so we'll move this off to the side. And now I'm going to take my cheeses, my Parmesan, and my cheddar. I want to get all of that out of the bowl here. I'm just going to get a quick stir on this. With my hands, so that we can make sure that the flour and the cheese are incorporated. But the other thing we're doing by stirring this up right now is each piece of cheese is getting coated in flour. So you want to break up any lumps you might find. I use my hand for this just to make sure that I can see with my hands, I can feel if there's anything that needs addressing. All right, so now I have my wet ingredients going to go into my dry ingredients. All right, so we're just going to pour that in. I'm going to use my spatula to get all of that out. Right. And now using my spatula, I'm going to fold this all in. So when we're folding, remember you go from the outside to the middle, outside to the middle, and you do that until everything's incorporated. It's going to take a moment. I usually put a stir or two in there as well. There we go. So we're going to stir this until everything's combined. All right, so once you're done combining this, keep in mind this is going to be heavy and thick, okay? So we're going to put that right into our loaf pan so that we can get it into the oven for 45 minutes. Anywhere between 40 and 45 minutes. So there we go. Tip that in. You can see it's really thick. All right, so we're going to get this in our pan. This is part of why we went ahead and gave it a good oiling. And you can see it's very wet, sticking to my hands nicely. So I'm just going to even this out so we get a nice even bake on it. Not worried about what the top looks like. It'll rise. It'll look beautiful. It'll taste even better. So once we've got that all put together, we're going to pop it in the oven for 45 minutes and be ready to taste it in about another 50 to 60 minutes. Okay, our 45 minutes are up. Let's see how this turned out. Oh, look at that. Look at how pretty that is. Beautiful browning on the top. It looks really good. All right, we're going to take this off out of the oven and we're going to let it cool on a wire rack for about at minimum 10 minutes. But really, I'm going to let it sit for about a good half hour. Oh, doesn't that look great? Can't wait to try this. All right, well, there it is. We've got our bread out. It smells great. You can smell the cheddar. You can smell the Parmesan. You can see it's got a beautiful crust here at the top. And it did actually rise. If you recall, it was just about down to here when we put it in. So it rose, and it's not going to be as dense as it may have looked when you put it in. So I would encourage you to try making this. It's very quick, very easy to make, and you can make it in time for a meal on the same day. I'm going to let this sit now for about another 20 to 30 minutes personally so that I can have it with dinner. I hope you try this because that's delicious.